Namaste, yogis. I'm Suzanne Dulin, the founder of Sadhana, and today's Meeta Yogi is on One World United in Peace, yoga breathwork for peace. Today's guests are Rabia Hayek, welcome, and Joe Roberson. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, Suzanne.
I'm going to give a bio for each of these guests. Rabia Hayek is a visionary founder and co-creator of Do As One and OmniBreath. As a speaker and breathworker, Rabia travels the globe, teaching people how to use breathing in ways that they never have, in order to awaken their life force to its full potential. In 2006, Rabia had a powerful vision to unite 1 billion people to consciously breathe together, which is what we're going to be talking about today. On July 7th, 2007, or 777, Do As One was born to facilitate this massive connection and get the power of breathing together back to humanity. Rabia is the driving force behind his breathing education company, OmniBreath, where they teach optimal breathing and conscious breathing through his life force mastery breathing modality. Rabia is passionate about developing ways to bring conscious breathing practices into daily life, using technology to connect us rather than separate us, which is what's going on at the Do As One website. Check it out. He is a member of the International Breathwork Foundation and is currently leading efforts to add breathwork and breathworker to the dictionary, which is one of the things that we'll also be talking about today. So thank you, Rabia. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. So great to be here. Looking forward to sharing.
Me too. Before we get into our conversation, I also have to introduce our other guest, the Sadhana resident breathwork expert, Joe Roberson. Joe is the teacher of breath-centered practices and the author of One Half Breath at a Time, which is forthcoming, as well as courses that he's creating at Sadhana. Not only is he developing his own course based on his book for Sadhana, but he's also helping to develop courses as an instructional designer, working currently now with our course on nonviolent communications. He is an instructional designer, as I mentioned, and he's also an artist. He is the father of 3. So I hope that you'll be talking a little bit about your role as a father tonight too, Joe.
Well, not only am I a father of 3 sons, but I'm also a grandfather of 1 grandson.
Wow, all right.
That's right.
So, and actually the book is dedicated to the little man.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And, you know, it's for him and his generation and, you know, generations to come that this is important for us to do. You know, part of what I want to do with the book and with the courses and other things related to the book is to basically bring awareness of the value and benefits of conscious breathing and breath-centered practices and to more people in a nutshell. You know, 1 billion sounds like a good round number to me.
And actually this segues really nicely into what we want to talk about, which is Joe's work. And the reason that we invited Rabia here tonight is that Joe's work is really about individual practice. But then we feel that there's a connection into this aspect of breath work as communal practice, which is what Rabia specializes in. So I want to begin, Joe, by talking about this concept of the individual practice so we can open it up and expand the definition beyond what we've talked about previously here in the Meeta Yogis you've been on, breath work as an individual practice. So can you start us off talking a little bit about how we as individuals practice breath work?
Sure. You know, normally when I talk about breathing and breath work and and when I teach these things, 99% of the time I'm talking about how a person breathes, the structure, the anatomy, physics, it's all focused on that one person and the insides of that one person and what they do to breathe, and how we can become more aware of it, relax it more, so it's all intrapersonal, which again is why I'm so glad that Rabia is here tonight, because what I want to do to kind of to segue and hand it over to Rabia in a moment is that I'd like to talk about breathing in a way that I haven't done before, which is that breathing is never, ever completely intrapersonal. Breathing is always communal. The basic fact, you can start off from the basic fact that, as opposed to your blood system, your cardiovascular system is a closed system. Blood, it's not supposed to get outside the body. There is nothing going in and out of the blood system. It's closed. Breathing is an open system or a semi-open system. And, every time you inhale, you draw in the outside world, you draw in the outside air, you draw in the outside atmosphere, and it becomes part of you. And then when you exhale, you not only release what you took in, but you also release stuff, carbon dioxide and moisture and so on that you've added to it. And so, the fact is that we co-breathe with the entire planet. And
it's elemental, fundamental to breath, and we don't think it feels personal, but it just at the most basic level, it's an exchange with the rest of the surroundings around you.
Yeah, and two things. Number one, in order for us to inhale and exhale, plants have to inhale and exhale the opposite of us. The plants exhale oxygen so we can inhale oxygen, and then we exhale carbon dioxide so the plants can inhale carbon dioxide. So that's a basic fundamental co-breathing that we do with every plant on the planet, everything that does photosynthesis, basically. And that's to me the co-breathing idea with plants is the easiest and most direct entry point into this whole idea of breathing with the planet, of co-breathing, of it not being an interpersonal thing. And the second piece of this is, why do we think it is? Why do we have this already idea that we've received from the culture that breathing is personal? And Rabia and I talked about this, we discussed this a little bit earlier, that I think a lot of it has to do with the plague, the things that happened in Europe in the 1300s, whenever that was, 1400s. But the ideas of humorism, where basically the idea was that disease was always was caused by bad air.
So, Rabia, can you talk a little bit about this history that happened with breath work of the medieval times and the ideas of that being a carrier of disease that affected how we perceive breath work?
Sure. And right before hopping into that, though, I wanted to drip into the elemental piece that he said, that there's one more magical piece to the element aspect of us breathing together that most people run around not even knowing about all their lives, and it's so fascinating. And it is that the element argon is an element that is inert, which means it doesn't combine itself with any other element out here in this air, which means the same argon, exactly the same elemental argon, has been breathed over and over in and out of all the humans, all the living beings that have existed. In the same way, you can think, wow, the exact same elements of argon were breathed through our ancestry and through historical figures, unchanged, and it's still being passed around. Those same elemental, those atoms. Anyway.
That's amazing. What
piece.
percentage, do you know roughly what percentage of our breath is this argon?
I don't know. I think it's less than 1%.
So you're saying that unlike oxygen, which combines with other elements to make compounds, that it always is, it's uncombined, and so we're breathing
unchanged. Exactly.
argon. Yeah.
So this is one of the gases that it's just kind of neat to know and feel that we've been passing this thing around unchanged since the days of way back, the days since creation. But now to hop into the history of what happened to the breath, that it's very interesting to see that we came very close together, in particular practice in sociologically in Europe amongst the Christians, what I'm getting ready to talk about, and then moved away from it and got pushed back and away from the power of us breathing together. In the year 300, 400, that early in the European Christian background in the history, we find that there was a ritual of breathing together that was done, and it was referred to in two ways. One was the kiss of peace, was one of the words for it, or pax in the Latin, and that led them to experiencing peace and then calling out what they were feeling as spiriting together. So feeling peace, spiriting together, they came up with a name for the ritual, and that is conspiratio. Now you hear this and let it hit your ears, conspiratio, you perhaps hear inside of that word conspire. This is part of the etymology of where we got this word conspire. And very interesting also, to continue the factoid, we didn't get the word conspiracy until 1386. You didn't get conspiracy theory till 1909. So really 1386, and then you get conspiratio in 300 or 400. It meant to spirit together or to breathe together far before it meant to unite for illegal purposes.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's one of the fun things I like to point back at and say, look, we had a word meant to breathe together.
See, the Latin
abstract come from of how we can play with this breath together.
The Latins had so many words for killing, I would have assumed that they would have invented conspire as a conspiracy. So very interesting. So these were their spiritual practices surrounding breath, just as many spiritual practices do today. But what's interesting to me is that specific focus on it toward peace.
Yes. This knowingness that they had, that they actually had something special amongst them, that if you blew into someone's mouth, were you really going to go cheat them in the square later? No, it really created a tight-knitness amongst them. And European historians have written about it, that really this practice could have been one of the practices amongst many that really was a benchmark of how they united. Until when? And this is the piece that makes you think, okay, how did we lose that? Not to say that Christianity has informed or inspired all of our sociology or the ways we live, but by all means, where did that get lost was when the plague came along, and nobody, or as Joe said, humorism, this comes from not breathing the air, that the air can carry communicable diseases, was something that very quickly shut down. Hey, okay, we're not going to be breathing together. And perhaps the more phobic people got about the air, it created a less and less attention on breathing deeply. And perhaps that was not the case in cultures like in India and in the Far East, in China, and places where the chi, the prana, were still being taught about as an everyday piece of education in the social fabric. So the invitation, I believe now, is for us to return this come from of not only breathing deeply, but all the facets of breath for the singular, for us, and also for us breathing together as a species. And then putting them back in to the dictionary, putting them back into the ways we practice, having rituals where we breathe together that perhaps are new ones. You know, I'm inviting people to breathe together with music at the festivals in a way I've never done before. And people are loving it because sounds like dubstep music and breathing together, creating a force and a propulsion that humans haven't tasted, or at least in this way, in a while. So it's a fun discovery. We're having fun with that.
So you're leading dubstep and breathwork together? Are you doing like, sort of manipulated breathwork, like holotropic breathwork, or are they breathing in a rhythm with the music, or what are you doing?
What's happening is I'm instructing over an hour what we're going to be using, and then using a particular led rhythmic with the music, with the rhythm breathing exercise. I'm using a simulation, you could say, similarly to the Wim Hof, if you're familiar, where we're activating, and it's an activating energization movement of the breath, but you're doing it rhythmically, and you're even doing it synchronously with the group. As you do so, the aspects of breathing consciously just for the self dissolve into a greater realization, a greater experience viscerally of what's going on, which is that I'm breathing as a larger being. I, with these 40, 50 people in a geodesic dome, are being re-impressed by the breath itself, by what we're feeling, by moving the arms through the field synchronously and breathing together, and then noticing. And I tell you, as I've done it in different countries, same human, same humans, same hearts, same breath, and that's inspiring. And it's not even me exclaiming it. Afterwards, you hear from people, whoa, what was that, in terms of the feeling of unity? So I think people are looking for, in such a wild world, how do we gain greater technologies that bring the feeling of unity so we can use it, and the feeling of peace behind that unity to utilize it.
That sounds so beautiful. One of the things that I've been thinking about lately, and this somewhat came out of the conversation that we had last week with Petri Bernsen, who, if people are watching this and you didn't see that, go check out that conversation with this philosopher talking about the breath, because it's really fascinating. But it's just this idea of the experience of peace. Like if we were to describe what peace is, we come to this bodily experience of peace in our bodies, of easy breathing. And I think that to create that as a communal experience where everyone is relaxed all at the same time, must create like a powerful group experience where you're actually bringing people into a similar attunement of an easy breath in their body, all experiencing it at once.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. And I can expound, but Joe, you got something to say about that?
I'm trying to squeeze it down to a pithy, so it doesn't go on all night. Well, basically, when you were talking about leading this group breathing as one experience, you reminded me of polyvagal theory. I don't know if you're familiar with polyvagal or not. Yes,
I am.
I see
Yeah.
you shaking your head. When I first, and I first heard about it from Dan Siegel at Kripalu in 2015.
Yeah.
And okay, in a nutshell, I think I should explain what polyvagal is.
You
right?
must, so people understand. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so
What the heck is polyvagal, Joe?
okay, so the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body. Forgive me if I don't get all the details correctly, but the vagal nerve controls the heart rate, controls a lot of things. Do you know, Rabia, am I correct in saying that the vagal nerve is part of the parasympathetic system? Or I'm not sure if it's
part of the entire autonomic nervous system and wanders through the entire body, branching out throughout the entire body. In fact, vagus in Latin means the wanderer.
Yeah.
So go on, wanders through the entire body. Take them back to birth in that piece. Go ahead.
The point, the reason.
Before you go any further.
Yes.
So physically, where is the vagus nerve? It branches
throughout
through
the entire body.
But
Wanders
where
throughout the entire body.
It's the main along the
in the brain.
Of the body.
It connects to the brain and then branches out from there.
And is it sort of like a spider web, or is it more like a tree trunk that's branching out?
I believe more like a web. Hence the name wanderer. It's wandered its way all the way throughout in the body. And
fascinating. So it's sort of almost like fascia, something that just throughout, interwoven in your whole body.
Yes.
Amazing. Something like that. But okay. Specifically, up until Stephen Porges kind of published his work, and I guess he named it polyvagal. Up until that point, there was only one vagus nerve, or there was only that the vagus nerve was one thing, okay? But what he theorizes or proved, not sure which, but phylogenetically, in the evolution of the human body, the vagus nerve has more than one layer. Anyway, let me jump straight to the point, because I'm going to lose it if I don't. The function of the newest, most recent layer of the vagus nerve is social bonding, is intimacy, love, connection, and unity between people. Like when you see a mother and a baby, and they are locked eyes with each other, and they're just gazing into each other's eyes, that is the polyvagal in full force, okay? And what I heard when Rabia was describing this group experience of being one bigger body, that's what I heard. I heard this is what polyvagal means, and that it is, it's something that makes humans, that we have this part of this new development in the nervous system that has made possible new forms of love, new forms of intimacy, new forms of relationships and bonding and togetherness.
You're saying that basically our sense of community and of personal bonds is actually tied together physiologically through the experience of the breath because of the functions of the vagus nerve.
I can't explain the mechanism of it. I can't, Stephen Porges writes about it very eloquently, and Dr. Siegel, talks about it very eloquently. But basically, what I gleaned from it is that only because of this newer, layer of the vagus nerve, do we have the capacity that it is the conduit? This is the conduit of, you know, and I'm not talking about lust, and I'm not talking about the kind of tribal, you know, I'm talking about the kind of intimacy and bonding where there's no longer two, there's one.
I understand. A sense of unity.
Yeah, does that jive with your understanding, Rabia?
It absolutely, it's taking us further into understanding why that which branches through me and branches through you when activated is validating a part of our evolution that is this wanting to be so intimate and tight-knit and connective. We are such social loving beings when we allow ourselves to be. Why is it that you can be on the streets of a brand new country, new town, never been there, and you just offer up a question and someone wants to be generous to you, they want to receive you? I've always been interested in what that is in the human psyche that creates that, so people can harvest it and use it, and always know that we're willing to reach out and connect. And perhaps breathing together is the aspect that when we lean into it and remind each other, it may be the yarn, the fabric that makes up the tapestry of how we do oneness, how we understand it in a greater way.
Maybe we always were one and that we only experience ourselves as individuals, but really if we look at it from the function of the breath, you know, there is no difference between us.
You know, I always have to throw in a qualifier whenever the conversation goes to there's only unity and separation is purely an ego illusion, because I do not agree with that at all, and I'll tell you why. A student one day after class, she asked me a question. She said, you know, I keep hearing this thing in these yoga classes I go to, you know, the teachers say, you know, separation is an illusion, the ego is the problem. And she just looked at me and she said, well, if that's true, then why doesn't it feel true? And I said, basically, the sense of separateness is the natural outcome of your immune system doing its job, because your immune system at every second of every day is saying friend or foe, friend or foe, friend or foe, poison or food, attacker or lover, right? Your immune system's doing that like a computer 24 hours a day.
So as a cognitive philosopher, I just have to say not like a computer, because that our systems are so much more sophisticated than that. However, I do agree with you that fundamentally that individual consciousness definitely has a very fundamental role in keeping us safe and driving us. But I do believe that we also have this ability to shift to another consciousness, which is what breath allows us to do. And I think that there is a value to shifting to that point of view, and that it's easy to stay in a consciousness that is purely individual. And I would like to, I think there's such a fundamental sense of peace and connection when we shift our focus into this more unity focus. So I think that's why there's so much work in spirituality toward shifting our consciousness away. Not to say that we should never take that individual consciousness, but to say there's something beautiful here that we don't experience when we are in that individual focus.
Yeah, and let me clarify. I wasn't saying it. It's not either or. It's not an either or question. It's a when question.
I agree.
It is. Even, you know, I can flash back to an old alchemical text called Picatrix from the Arab world, which is old. You talk about a guy that took multiple grimoires, put them together and said, hey, this is some very interesting knowledge we found. They looked at the world through two lenses. One, the absolute. One, the relative. The relative lens of being able to look at the world, the relative, if I was to pronounce it that way, right?
Yeah.
Goes to looking at all of the aspects of our life in the ways we relate as separate beings. At the same time, one can look at the overlay that is always there and also part of it, that is the absolute, which is the oneness spectacle and the oneness lens. When New Age spirituality seeks to overlay both of them and talk about them at the same time, confusion happens. Because one often says, oh, how could it be? We're all one. Why isn't it behaving that way? And you get someone like Marianne Williamson saying, and I love that she said this amongst the festival community, if it's all one, then wouldn't we care about the 30,000 children that just died in the last few hours? That isn't all the beauty of the oneness. That is something happening in the relative, and it's not utilizing the piece of the oneness. How interesting to separate the two. It helps me to see a way back, to find peace with the fact that so much of the chaos is happening in the relative, and to look at it that way, to be willing to separate it and not say, oh, and we're all one, and then get confused and offer confusion. I think it's a big deal. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that, Rabia? Because I'm interested in what you're saying and about this idea that, okay, so let me just see if I'm understanding what you're saying first, which is it sounds to me like what you're saying is that if we were to truly be in a unity consciousness, we wouldn't only be experiencing, beautiful, blissful things. We'd also be experiencing the horror of what's happening on a mass scale in our culture. And that's not what happens when we shift into a unity consciousness. Is that true? That's what you're saying?
One must maybe not over-entertain the idea of shifting into unity consciousness as the entire subject, but rather step back away from a shift of unity consciousness for a moment and just look at the elemental level of this creation having two things overlaid, two lenses. One is this duality. This we've heard of in spirituality and spiritual books often. And this way of experiencing the world is here for our relative ability, our ability to relate that I was born in this body. I was born as a separate being, and that I can rejoice in. I'm not here to, I often like to say we weren't born into the lotus posture meditating, and we were here to just sit here meditating the entire time. We were born into this relative context. And so for us to be willing to understand life from the relative and then shift over here for a moment and look at the whole entirety of life through the oneness lens apart from, and see what is really being spoken about when it has been written about, that there is this absoluteness, this absolute consciousness. If you look at the writings of Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind, that whole lineage is talking about absolutism and the ability to use it as a human. But it gets confusing if you think that you can look at the oneness and the duality all at the same time, all the time. This is where it gets confusing. But when we separate them, it gets clear, and it becomes more interesting, because now you don't have to blame the things that happen in the dual on oneness or vice versa. You say,
okay,
aren't we all one? Why is the war happening? Why are wars, right?
Right. So what you're saying is that there's this false dichotomy between, and I think this is what Joe is saying as well, that and you can, say, no, this isn't what it is, but there's a false dichotomy that there's either the duality or there's the oneness. And actually you know, there's a value to being able to experience the world each way. They both are correct. There's not it's not, we get into this logic puzzle where we say, well, if it's all one, then there can't be duality. And if there's duality, then we can't have unity. But the reality is that there are just two different lenses of looking at the world. Both of them are correct, and it's not an either or. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's a good distillation. Sure.
Yeah, because the simple fact is, as Albert Einstein said a long time ago, a human being is a part of a whole which we call universe. And I can't quote it verbatim, but basically he says that, you know, our job, the job that what humanity has to do is to transform his awareness, or, you know, however you want to say, to understand that this meanness is relative. You know, Einstein called it a sort of mental prison, a visual illusion. But it is, you know, it is the movie that we live through. There's no getting around it. So it's not an either or question. It's like, okay, you know, the easy way for me to say it is, you know, I'm just me. I'm just what's inside my skin. Oh, but wait a minute. I'm also a member of, let's see, REI, AARP. I'm an American. I'm a part of all these different groups. I'm a member of Sadhana. I'm a member, you know, and then there's all these things inside of my skin that are part of me, you know, that are, so on these different scales, each has its own completeness and separateness, but it's all just a matter of perspective, you know, perspective and scale. And so I'm a separate whole system like you are, but that's not all I am.
But and I think what the part of it is that we don't really have a sense perception of ourselves as in this sort of group consciousness that we can access as easily. And so, like, when we sit here and talk about sharing breath with each other, although we can intellectually experience that, it's difficult to shift into that as an actual perception, because, like, unless it, like Rabia was talking about, somebody's like literally breathing into your mouth, you don't actually experience breath as shared.
Well, actually, one of the things that hit me one day while driving amongst huge greenery and just enjoying this, wow, I'm breathing with all this greenery, but it's silent. And, you know, the wind may go, you know, but I can't hear the tree breathe, but I can hear you breathe the moment you allow me to. And so, man, the minute you get just 2 people, then 3 people, then 5, get 10, and the sound of breath begins to be, again, inspiring. It in itself is a trait that we're studying. I have a partnership going with the American Institute of Stress, and with Harvard, actually. We have someone over there taking a look at the sound of one breath. That the technology we created on Do As One, all the breathing rooms are defaulted to the sound of breath being what leads you, not a bell, not the sound of the ocean. As an audio engineer, way back, I said, wow, I want to take the moment here to audio engineer the sound of breath to affect people in a way that I believe is so old and primordial that, think about it, in month 4, we're inside of mama and the ears open up. And we hear what? Our first teacher, the sound of the breath. And so when you hear that sound, we take it for granted once we come out into it because our education system doesn't point to that. But look at us pointing right now and think and feel. Sound of breath is one of the things that gets us feeling the communal activity of us breathing together. In Tantra, yab yum when you're forehead to forehead with whom you're experiencing tantra with. You're hearing the breath, you're feeling the breath, and that aspect takes you deeper. And so, fun to point at that with you for a moment. I wanted to say that from what Joe was saying about the social aspect, and not only being a part of, being who he is, but being a part of groups and being in the way that we are social beings, and going back to that polyvagal theory, that it's the newest layer to the vagus nerve and the way it's expressing. It shows me that we are social beings evolving into being even greater social beings and learning how to break down the boundaries. One of the things Michael Beckwith from the Agape lineage brought that I love is he used to say, we began as egocentric beings in the cave as the caveman guarding what's behind you. And then we came out of the cave and we found our first tribe. We became ethnocentric beings. And now we're ready to evolve from the ethnocentricity to what I think the internet gave us a gift to do. And that's really, truly the global family realizing itself as that, the ability to be a part of that, one as one here, sitting here, realizing myself as one with the entirety. Because in the 80s, I couldn't Google Zimbabwe and see what was going on there. It could be threatening. It was scary. But today, let me take a look. What's going on in Zimbabwe? And so I love that that's where we're at in our evolution. And to think of our socialness as being on a timeline is inspiring. Woo.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. In preparing for this, at some point, some voice in my head said, "Yeah, I heard Joseph Campbell. I heard Joseph Campbell talking about this image being the new myth that would unite all of Homo sapiens, all of humankind, and it's really hard. It's really hard to imagine what humans, what people, what they thought about the world before having this image, because the Earth was flat.
Right.
And the Earth only extended out as far as they had walked. That was the end of the universe to them, for real. They had no conception of this blue marble, right?
Yeah.
And what Campbell says is that this is what we, like breathing, this is something we all are a member of. And therefore, that this image of the blue planet is the perfect inspiration for transcending, for getting past tribal border walls, us versus them, and like that.
And one of the reasons Joseph Campbell said that and surmised that would be that effective was because he was reflecting on the experience that astronauts were having by getting to see that in actuality. So he had heard, there's been chatter about astronauts, as soon as they're pulling away, the ability to see it in its entirety didn't have them looking for their country on the map, on this great, beautiful spectacle that we get to live on. And so to know that it was an experience that was continuing to happen to astronauts is fascinating. There's the human. Oh, there they go, riding up above, and oh, look, there it is. One. There isn't two or five.
Yeah, and I don't know how they describe it, but I would have to imagine that it would be quite literally a mind-blowing moment.
Yes.
Even even if you've seen the photographs, but it's like it's a transformative moment, because literally how you've been seeing the world and engaging the world and thinking the world just gets blown apart, you know, and you go, oh my God, this is so beautiful and amazing. This is a miracle. Why is it even here? You know, why is the universe even here, for God's sake? No, you know, much less how does it work? But what's it even? Yeah, okay.
I want to share a personal story to sort of bring back to, you know, this consciousness, but also into this particularly a connection to breath and to air, which has been sort of the conversation that's been going through. And I think that it's interesting to think, okay, yes, on a medical level, we can experience this oneness, but also I think that we experience there's another fundamental level with air and wind of connection that is, kind of a metaphorical or you know, like a fable kind of level. When I actually had an awakening experience when I was 19, and that's really how I started getting into yoga, was before I actually ever did yoga. And I definitely had not done any spiritual practices. I just went into an altered state of consciousness for a day. And during that day, one of the things that I experienced was early in the morning, I sat out on my balcony and I watched the sunrise. And today I would say I meditated. But, you know, then I was just, you know, I'd never really meditated before. And I sat down and I watched, there was a beautiful sunny day and there were little sort of fluffy clouds in the sky. And as I watched these clouds going across the sky, I said, oh, we're like that cloud. You know, we think that we're individually moving across the sky, but actually we're all being moved by this larger force. And it was that larger force that I was experiencing that day. And I still was experiencing myself as an individual, but also, you know, this other consciousness that was fundamental that it was almost like I'd forgotten that I could shift into that mode. And I think that breath, beyond just being this physical thing that we experience, the vagus nerve, or the fact that we, you know, physically share that experience of breathing, I believe that there's also a sort of metaphoric level of breath as a connection that we can tune to, like almost a visual image of what does it feel like to be united.
Wow. You know, who was it who said that God is the breath within the breath?
Who was that?
It sounds like Rumi, but I'm not sure.
I want to say it was Rumi. I was about to say Rumi.
I'm going to say Rumi. So I want to start to wind this conversation up, even though we could go all night. I know. No. But with Rabia here, I want to shift into taking, because we kind of gone like really global, like we literally went out of the earth into that big perspective. And I want to kind of come right back down into the work that Rabia is doing with OmniBreath. So talk with me about this work that you're doing, this idea, this vision that you had of 1 billion people breathing together, and these breathing rooms that you have on your website. What are you experiencing with this work? First of all, I'd like to know what you're learning as you're doing this, as you're trying to actually take this vision and make it material.
Thank you. What I'm learning, it has been an amazing opportunity to keep getting impressed by the breath, you know, to have the feeling even that people are logged in breathing with you creates a similar feeling tone to that which Joseph Campbell pointed out in that Blue Marble, that when we just take our beingness from being right here in this room to the image of us being a part of this great planet and this great species of humanity, this great human heart, then breathing with that great spectacle becomes more interesting, and it becomes something viscerally changing. Something changes when I'm breathing with this. You could call it a technique of 5 breaths per minute, coherent breathing. It has been termed, that's even a trademark term, but this 5 breaths per minute that you're breathing with could be anything. It could be a different rhythm, but we set 5 breaths per minute for a particular reason, that we'd reached out and felt amongst many different practitioners why 5 breaths per minute might be connective. And then years later, we got the data. So Richard Brown, Dr. Brown, Patricia Gerbarg, and them came with 5 breaths per minute data 5 years after we had set it at 5 breaths per minute. And so the discovery continued as we saw, wow, this is putting people into coherence between their heart and their brain are in a very healthy position. And we're feeling this oneness pulsating through us. We're in the bit of the chrysalis. Yeah, the caterpillar broken down before the butterfly comes out. We're in a reforming of Do As One, which is the website where that technology takes place. I invite you to it, doasone.com. If your browser doesn't allow you to run Flash, we are going to be putting a new version out soon, so please be patient with us. But this new version,
so I just want to say, to let people know what they see when they go to Do One, is right now you have Multimedia Flash, which a lot of people know that technology has been it's going obsolete on the internet. But if you're able to run Flash in your browser, then you can come into these physical spaces where there's other people there, and it's basically guided meditations, breath meditations that you can do, and it shows you how many people are in the room along with you. So you have that experience of being together with people, even though you're separate.
Thank you for describing that. So just layman, so people can get it. Sometimes I'm so caught in the vision and up here about what's going on in it. But yeah, to arrive, breathe together, even though, albeit one might have just 10 minutes ago been breathing on their own and doing a technique on your own, all of a sudden you plug in through something that's showing you that others are with you, and there's different come from. We wish to expand that for humanity. We wish to invite people into a world where we get up in the morning and we breathe together. A large faction of humanity getting up, and at any time you hop in, there's people breathing together, and then off into the world we go, honoring the breath in a heightened way, understanding that it is a greater piece of this existence down here. Do As One's working the breathing together piece. OmniBreath is putting education out about, similarly what Joe is doing in terms of there needs to be more education about how we understand these breathing techniques and how to apply them at best, because we're evolving. One of the constantly, well, one of the gurus I studied with, Dr. Acharya Yogesh, used to say every 10 years, if we could have a new manual relating the breath to how we've evolved, it would be a wonderful thing. And I was like, wow, okay, let's do that. So it's beautiful. Colleagues all around the world have been crystallizing what they've found into books, excuse me. And so getting to do that myself, I look forward to sharing as well soon a work of 7 years about the power of breathing and breathing together synchronously particularly.
It's beautiful. I love your vision, and I love what the sites that you're putting up. And because you brought up coherent breathing, I want to also get Joe a chance to talk a little bit about the audio track that he has on the Insight Timer, which is another way to experience this unity of breath together with people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up coherent breathing, and I actually have official permission to use the trademark name from Stephen Elliott. So yeah, coherent breathing, the technique is a trademark, but the technique itself is just basically 5 breaths per minute. And just very briefly, I just want to say the reason that that 5 breaths per minute is so effective, so powerful, is because that is the resonant frequency of the heart rhythm. So when you breathe at this rhythm, you actually are bringing entrainment. You're getting your heart rhythm and your breathing rhythm to dance together optimally. And so if you want to, over on the Insight Timer app, it's, you know, mobile app, iOS app, or I'm sure it's Android as well. But basically, there's 3 tracks there. If you just search for Joseph Roberson, or if you just search for Coherent Breathing Symphony, and there's 3 tracks. First track just says, this is what it is, and explains what you're going to do. Second track is 9 minutes or so, and I narrate, you know, say inhale, exhale, just to tell you when to breathe, sort of. And then the third track is 25 minutes, and it's just music. The only cueing is just a bowl, a ding, every 6 seconds, 5-6 seconds.
Yeah, it's beautiful, the audio that's done with it, and it's similar to what Rabia talked about, that there's beautiful audio engineering done by Ty Ford, and a sound of the breath, as well as music that is very thoughtfully put together in order to help you, you know, move at that rhythm without a lot of clunky cues. I think it was beautifully thought through. I want to, for both of you, I'm just going to take us back to the gallery view as we wind up, just say that I think that it's so important that people, we sit here and explain why, but I really want everybody to know that now go and do it. Because I think that the one thing that we didn't really talk about is that, you know, we do have the tools to change our perspective, and it's these tools, this isn't an intellectual exercise. You have to go and practice. And so Rabia and Joe have put the tools out there for you to do this, and whether you want to do it video, whether you want to do it audio, the point is you need to do it, and you need to do it together with the community on a regular basis so that you can experience this. And I think that all of the things that we talked about tonight, it's just to sort of invite you in and say, we can tell you how wonderful it is, but you've got to go out and do it in order to really experience peace. And imagine if we could meet Rabia's vision. Imagine your website practically, what did they say, breaking the internet.
Yeah.
Like, that's my vision. Let's break the internet at Do As One and all get on and start experiencing what you described under that geodesic dome, only 1 billion people together, all breathing together. I think that we might just start to find ways to move away from the sense of separation and to find new ways to work together.
I love it. Celebrate.
Thank you so much, Rabia, for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's been so great playing with you both.
Yes. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you,
Joe.
Suzanne. As always, you know, what would I do without you, Suzanne?
We're
And,
so lucky to have each other.
and Rabia, you know, just thank you. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. And I want to ask people to please subscribe, please share, please like. All those things help this video to become more visible to more people, which is important, because I think the work we're doing is important. And then we'll have links to everything that we discussed in the description of the video up on YouTube. So if you're looking for any of this information, or you're looking to find Do As One website or the Insight Timer, just go into the description and you'll find everything that you need. So thank you, everybody. Good night.